everyone, welcome to the Horror Realm. I'm Travis Bruce, and today we're doing another Women of Horror Spotlight. Today I have with us, she's an author, and she has a book out right now that's called The Vessel. I have with us Peggy Christie. Peggy, welcome to the Horror Realm.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Hey, it's a pleasure having you on. So tell us a little bit about The Vessel.
Well, it's actually the first novel I had come out 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. It's basically a Chinese energy vampires is the short and sweet of it. Basically, it's a human woman that's caught between two sects of vampires, ones that uphold the law and ones that do whatever the hell they want. And she's kind of a key to this really bad prophecy that if the vampires get their way, it's really not a good thing. So vampires are like my favorite thing ever. So I wanted to write something, but I wanted it to be a little bit different. So that's how I ended up with that.
And I love vampires as well. And, you know, when it's done, when it's done right, it's amazing. But but if it's done wrong, it can be bad.
Yeah. I mean, even bad like vampire movies or books, it's like, well, there is one exception. Most of the time I'm like, I don't care if it's a really crappy movie or if it's really cheesy or whatever. If it's vampires, I'm in. There have only been a couple of exceptions to that. Twilight.
Yes.
Other than that, I mean, they're just so much fun. They're so much fun.
They really are. I mean, I would love to be a vampire. I would like when people ask me like, which monster would I want to be? I'm like vampire every single day. Like, but you won't be able to go out in the daylight. I'm like, I'm a night person. Like, you know, I get my energy from night. Like, I stay up all night, and I am not a morning person. I do not like, you know, I'm just not a day person at all.
You know, and it depends on the lore that you follow. I mean, if you look at Bram Stoker's, it's like they can move around during the day. They're just not very strong, which is fine, but which makes them, I guess, maybe kind of hide in plain sight a little bit easier. But it's I think it's terrifying if there's a way that there's not a vulnerability, even in like a supernatural. Like if you ever remember the movie Death Becomes Her.
Yes.
I watched it once. I will never watch it again. That is absolutely terrifying to me. It's like, even if you're a vampire, you still have a chance to die. There are ways to kill you, but like in that one, it's like, no, I no. Like, I don't want there to be no way possible that no matter how mangled you are, you're still going to keep existing. It's like, no, that's terrifying. That is absolutely terrifying.
And that's no fun. It's not fun.
No! How fun is that where you have to maintain yourself with your neck broken and your skin falling off? And I mean, what? No. I mean,
the best part about being a vampire is that I could stay the way I am right now, you know, and just keep on living and learning and growing.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's fucking amazing. So what gave you the inspiration for this story?
I think just my basic love for vampires. I think one of the first vampire movies I saw, and I always get it screwed up. It was Christopher Lee, the Hammer films. If it was Blood of Dracula or just Count Dracula, I can't remember the exact. It was from like 1959, and I think that just because he was still absolutely terrifying. And I love all different kinds of vampires, but it's like my favorite vampire movie I think of all time is Fright Night, because Jerry Dandridge is terrifying, but he's so charismatic.
Yes.
And like you want to be his friend or you want to be his lover and blah, blah, blah. Whereas like Christopher Lee is just absolutely terrifying all the time. I'm like, there's nothing compelling, I don't think, about the way he plays Dracula. But I think I've just been so fascinated with the idea of that supernatural creature. So, you know, I think I started writing it in maybe 2011 or something like that, but it took me so long to just figure out a way to do it a little bit differently. But I just love vampires so much. I'm like, I want to contribute to the vast pool that is out there, but I still wanted to see if I could do something to add to it.
And I love that. Now I do. You agree with me that Twilight kind of fucked up vampires for a while. Like it fucked up. It really did. I mean, listen, but it was such a success, especially with teenage girls. But
Right, exactly.
like, yeah,
That's the key
but
with teen girls.
with teen girls, and I'll say maybe in their 20s
Mm.
or 20s, but it led to this road for years where there were TV shows and movies all following that teenage vampire love
Mhm.
aspect.
The angst is
Yeah,
like they don't have enough of that. They have to throw the vampire trope on top of it. But
yeah.
I think what was that's the first book, like vampire story book that I ever bought. I think I got about a third of the way through it and I put it down because I was like, this is the worst, the most poorly written book I'd ever come across in my life. And, you know, let alone the story and getting into the whole stalking a teenager and you're like a centuries old person, blah, blah, blah. But it's just, it's so badly written. It's just, so I had to put it down. And then I think 3 or 4 months later, I was like, you know what? I paid money for this. I'm going to read it. And I slogged through that. It took me so long to just get through it, but I'm like, I'm not going to, I've got to read it because I paid for it. And I was just so angry by the time I got to the end of it because I'm just like, I'm like, first of all, I wasn't the demographic, but I like a lot of young adult fiction because a lot of it is very well done, very well written, and can be very, maybe it's targeted for young adults, but it has overarching themes that I think a lot of people can connect to. And like Coraline is a perfect example of that, despite Neil Gaiman's recent issues. The story of Coraline is about a young girl, but it's like her, you know, finding her place in the world and dealing with all these weird things and struggling with stress and blah, 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 blah. It's like most people can kind of connect with that. Whereas in Twilight, it's like if you're a 13-year-old teenage girl, particularly with like ugly duckling syndrome, it speaks a little bit more to that because that's the way Bella's character is she's very self-conscious about everything. She has low self-esteem. She's angry at, you know, her family situation. And then this mysterious boy comes along and does all these things who's like watching her in her room while she's sleeping. And I'm like, that's so creepy. I'm like, this should not be something that young girls want to aspire to in a relationship. I'm just
exactly.
You know what I mean? If like she were a little bit older, maybe like 18 or 19 and had a little bit more wherewithal to know what the hell the world has to offer, it's like maybe it wouldn't have turned out as the way it did. But I think it's the writing that was the worst for me. It was just poor grammar, bad sentence structure, terrible flow. The ideas were everywhere. Descriptors were awful. It was like, yeah, I think that was my main issue with it.
Because I watched the first movie. So listen, I watch anything, right? And I'll
Sure.
if especially if there's buzz around it, I'll watch anything. Like I love Magic Mike. I watched Magic Mike and I enjoyed both of them, and I was like, okay, so
I saw
like
it at the theater. It's fine.
I saw it on a 16-hour plane ride. You know what I mean?
Wow.
You know, they had all these movies. I ran through all the movies. I was like, well, let me watch this match. I enjoyed it. So like,
it was entertaining.
It was entertaining. It was something fun. It was stupid, but like, I mean, I can pretty much like watch or respect anything. But I remember on that same plane ride, I watched the first Twilight, and it was like my brain stopped working. Like I was watching it because I was like,
yeah,
boy, I was like, boy, like this is what young women find entertaining. I'm like, whoa.
You know, and I don't want to like shit on anyone because you like what you like.
You like
and
what
you read what you know, and that kind of thing. But it's like, it's such the lowest common denominator. And this is from someone who loves like Z movies, B movies, like total crap. Because I'm entertained at least, and I'm not expecting Shakespeare, and I'm not expecting this. But when you're speaking to such a like impressionable and vulnerable generation of young people, it's like, this is what you're offering? It's like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's not good.
It's especially at the same time when like Hunger Games and even like the Harry Potter stuff was coming out was at the same time. I'm like, whoa, like I get Hunger Games, I get Harry Potter somewhat, But like, I just didn't understand the rant and rave between. I mean, those movies made hundreds of millions of dollars, and like, you know, they still have fan bases today. But like,
for sure. Which is why sometimes I don't like to shit on stuff, because I know, you know, everything's so personal and subjective. But it's like,
I actually had a male filmmaker on beginning of the year, and I asked him what his favorite horror movie. He said, I love Twilight, and I was like, really? I was like, okay,
poker face.
Yeah, because I mean, I never listen. I'm pretty sure there's men out there who love Twilight series.
Oh, I'm sure.
That was the first time I actually met one. So like, yeah. So,
I wonder if more men. I wonder if more men liked it as the things went on, like when the werewolf stuff got a little more developed, and you know, and you have a bunch of macho men werewolves running around. I wonder if that helped draw in a different crowd as well.
But I think those movies were made for women, and this is the only reason why, because they had super attractive guys when they were running around with the shirts off, greased up, oiled up. I mean, it was definitely for women. I mean, you know, so listen.
It's
to each his own. To each his own.
Very true. Very true.
Yes. All right. So, Peggy, you've been writing for a while now, and I understand that you actually work with other writers.
I do. I'm in a group now called the Great Lakes Association of Horror Writers, and a core of us were actually in another Michigan writing group. This is a while ago, so like maybe 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. And like any like group of people that are, you know, different minded, eventually those relationships kind of implode upon themselves. And a handful of us were like, wanted to start another group, because it's like, you know, maybe we should try again and just see if we can do it better. And so we started the Great Lakes Association of Horror Writers back in 2007, and happy to say we're actually still going. So I'm super happy about that. And we've tried to get out there and we do Motor City Comic Con every year.
Nice.
That's one of our bigger shows. Now Bookfest in Detroit, we've done like the past 4 or 5 years, I think, at this point, which is a really good show for us. We just want to network and meet people, and you know, you don't even have to necessarily be a writer to be in the group. You can just be a fan of horror. You can be an artist, photographer, whatever. And we just try to network with people and just kind of want to create this community of like-minded people who just love horror. And it's always fun. And we have a fun Halloween fundraiser every year, which ours will be coming up. I believe it's October 26th. We raise money for the Adrian Dominican Literacy organization. Nice. The Adrian Dominican nuns have had, it's like the Dominican Literacy Center, I believe is their official in Detroit. And they're like our official charity. So we've been raising money for them every year. Gosh, probably since like 2010, maybe even earlier than that. We try to do a theme for it. We try to have fun, just have food and drinks. And we usually go over to the VFW in Berkeley. It's kind of a more central location where more people can get to a little bit easier. And the group puts out themed anthologies every year that are member driven, but we also have like a little chapbook and a magazine. So we want other people, even if you're not a member, you can still kind of participate and kind of get that feel of what it's like to, maybe if you've never been published before, you can kind of get in the door, you know, through maybe a smaller organization. But we really have a lot of fun and we really enjoy what we do.
And it must be nice to have that community too.
It is.
Because I can imagine, like, as a YouTube creator, right? I don't have a community of other horror YouTube creators to talk to about the stress and the creative ideas and the bullshit. I don't have anyone who vent to. The only people I vent to are the people who are in my life who don't have YouTube channels, and they can only understand what I'm talking about, but so far, you know what I mean? But it must be nice to have that network of other writers that you guys can just talk about. Hey, you know, oh my goodness, it sucks when you get a bad review or something like. It must be nice.
Sure, and even within the writers group, there's like a critiquing group. So if you want to get some input on your writing, you know, without maybe throwing it out into the world to a publisher that may not take as much time to help you figure out maybe which direction you should be going or how you can improve, that kind of stuff. It's really great to have a group of people that, even if you're just sitting around shooting the shit, it's just really nice. Because, you know, I have 3 best friends, and none of them are really into horror like I am. So it's like, I can't really hang out and chat with you guys about this. So it's like, well, you know, and so you develop these friendships, you know, that I have with the people in the group. And if they're close enough, we go and do stuff outside the group. And it's just fun to have that camaraderie and that network to be a part of.
I'm jealous. I would listen. Horror YouTube creators, let's have a network that we can.
You guys really should. I know there are more of you out there, but
there's probably hundreds of thousands of us.
Yeah.
And, we should have like this whole. But I just feel like in the YouTube community, we're so competitive, which I'm not, because I bring on other horror YouTubers all the time and on my show to promote their shit. So like, but I don't know where this whole I don't know, it's competitive nature that we're trying to fight for subscribers of these. No, we can share those subscribers and views.
Yeah, that's, you know, and I think, I don't know if that's like an evolutionary kind of thing, like survival of the fittest. It's like, I need to survive, I need to be the best in order to be on top or whatever. And it's like, you know, you can have both. Exactly. It's like maybe your show offers something that another show doesn't, or just come at it from a different angle, or you're talking about, like, you're having authors come on, and I don't really know a lot of YouTube channels that do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know why. Yeah, it's like, I think it's hard for a lot of people to find their tribe, I guess is the phrase, but to find that community of like-minded people. So I think sometimes it is hard to find that stuff, which is sad.
Yeah.
But so I hope maybe people will start watching your channel and be like, oh, hey, you know, that guy's doing some really cool shit. So let's go talk to him. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Come on. I say all the time, anybody can come on my show and talk. If you do horror, if you're a horror creator.
Yeah, because you have a bunch of different, you have different stuff, not just authors, but.
Yeah, filmmakers, FX people who do comic books and everything. You know, if you're in horror, come on my show and talk. I love all that shit. So. So, right now, I mean, listen, I've asked this question to many authors. I want to hear your opinion. So, like, right now, it's great because, you know, authors, people who probably wouldn't have been authors 10 years ago are now able to be authors and get their stuff published. Did you feel like that's also, with the fact that there's no gatekeeping, is kind of watering down the product?
You know, I think in a way, I think what's problematic about self-publishing is for every like one really successful self-published author, you have 99 like people who like don't understand that it's like you need to edit your stuff. You need to have somebody help you format. You've got to have structure in it. Even with like your covers, it's like graphic design. Usually you don't have to have a degree in it, but it's like, don't just take your 3-year-old nephew's drawing and through it, which is a true story. So yeah, I was at a convention and years ago, and a guy set up across from my writers group, and it was like he just had the one book, but it was like a stream of consciousness. So there was no formatting, no structure. It was and it's when you encounter a lot of that's what I think not necessarily waters it down like the industry, but I think it makes people gun shy, that they're like, well, I don't want to try on an indie author or someone who is self-published because I read this other one and it was total crap, or I bought 10 from these other 10 authors and they were all total crap. But it's like, and I hate to tell people, like, just keep digging through the coal until you find that one diamond, but that's a lot of investment. I understand that, but I'm hoping that because now with like, you know, Amazon and KDP and Ingram and all of this, that there are now more tools out there that people maybe will help them realize like, hey, I can't just splatter shit on a page and just be like, hey, look, I'm selling all my books because I'm an author now and I did it. And I'm like, yeah, you're an author because you wrote it. That's cool. But it's like, could you at least clean it? Could you have someone else besides your mom look at it and tell you, you know, if it's good or bad? Because I think that's a big problem, is a lot of self-editing doesn't exist for some people. Like maybe they don't think That's like people who submit to even a bigger publication, but they don't edit their work. They think the editor's going to do it all for them. They're going to do all the cleaning up. They're going to understand what I mean. And I'm just going to send it over looking like this. I'm not going to follow the guidelines and blah, blah, blah. I think that's the main problem with self-publishing, because I've met a lot of authors and like some of it's really good and some of it's total crap. It's the problem is the consumer doesn't know what to trust. And you know what I mean? So
because I even quadruple check, like even like when I'm making a post on my Horror Realm YouTube or Instagram, I check multiple times for grammatical errors because I see so many people who are professionals, whether it be creators or authors, or like they'll make a post on social media and it's like, whoa, what does that even say? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what does that even say? And like, you're an author,
right?
Like, it's kind of scary because, listen, even when you're making a post, it's so easy to make mistakes and and put something that's completely incoherent. So imagine if you're writing a novel and you do the same thing. You don't have someone edit, look, proofread, do anything. You just put it out there. It is there's going to be some errors. There's going to be some mistakes. And it doesn't make you a bad person. It's just that it's a lot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we all have to start somewhere. And and some people think that they're already starting at the top. Just the fact that they're writing, a book. Like, oh, look, I finished my book. Okay, well, that's great. Well, now you got to go back and you got to go through and you got to do some self-editing and you got to clean it up and find the plot holes and blah, blah. But then you also have to go back and then give it to somebody else that's not invested in your life. Like I said, don't give it to your mom. Don't let your brother or your husband. I mean, like when I'm done writing something and it's been published, I'll give my husband a copy and then he'll read it. But I'm like, hey, can you look at this and edit it or to let me know? I'm like, no. I need to get someone who actually has editing experience or publishing. The good thing about my writers group is a lot of the people in it, because they've been writing and reading for quite a while, there are some really great editors in our group. So the guy who does our Eerie Tales themed anthology every year is a fantastic editor, and he's actually a publisher of a couple of my books. So it's nice to be able to have, that's another good thing when you're networking with people, is to be able to access that. But I think there's so much that goes into writing a book or a story that people think just writing it and then you're done. And it's like, no. There's so much work that goes into it. So it gets quite daunting. And I think a lot of people either don't recognize it or they don't think they need it, which is two very bad positions to have, unfortunately. But hopefully the more they do it, the more they talk to other writers and readers and they kind of network a little bit more. It's like they'll understand, oh, maybe a little bit more goes into this than just slapping words on a page and then I'm done. You know what I mean? So I'm hoping with self-publishing, because it's so popular and so easily accessible, that maybe that will be a side effect, is that people will start to improve because they'll recognize that there's a little bit more. Not everyone's going to. People are just going to just keep pumping out crap. And, like, oh, I sold 50 copies at this one show. Well, that's great. But I'm like, how's the long game for you? You know what I mean? Exactly. Like, maybe that's immediate, but it's like eventually people are going to figure out. It's like, is this any good? Is it even trying? It's
cash grab or what is it? Yeah,
exactly. And that would be another thing where it's like, oh, someone just wanted to jump on the writing bandwagon to sell a bunch of copies and make money or whatever. Because anybody who actually does do a lot of writing or is trying to be professional, it's like you really don't make a lot of money unless you are going to be the next Stephen King or Bentley Little or Dean Koontz. Which, how often does that happen? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So it's like, I think most of us recognize that it's like, unless some twist of fate, you're just at the right place at the right time. It's like, this is probably going to be like mid-list or lower. If you're lucky, you're mid-lister, which is kind of nice. But I haven't reached that yet. And I don't know if I will. And you know what? I'm okay. I'm okay with that.
And I was going to ask you a question on that. I've seen so many young authors who are self-publishing or they're putting out their first book for publication. And months pass by and I'll see on social media where they're like, okay, I'm done writing because my book it's not successful. You know, I'm not making any money off my book.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that normal with your first book?
I guess it depends on the individual as well, or what they even think of going into it to begin with. There's a lot of hubris in that for sure, where it's like, oh, I'm going to write this and everyone's going to love it and blah, 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 blah. I'm going to be the next Stephen King or whatever. And it's like, unfortunately, and I think that is mostly with youth. That is that sense of like, I'm so great, so I'm going to do great. I'm so great at this, I'm going to be great at this. But I know when I went into it, I was like, I was never expecting that I was going to like it would have been nice if my career like went, woo, she's super popular and everybody loves it. But that was this much of me. This much of me was just like, you know what? I just have this thing in my head and I need to get it out. If I can get it published, that'd be awesome. And, you know, I think if you expect right out of the gate to be super awesome. I mean, you think about it, even Stephen King's Carrie was rejected like 20 something times before it was ever picked up. So it's like even Stephen King wasn't Stephen King at the beginning. You know what I mean? So
it takes time.
I think if people getting into something like writing or any kind of creative endeavor, there is a long road to get anywhere. If you're lucky, like I'm saying, like a twist of fate, right place, right time. You just happen to meet someone who was in your industry and, oh, okay. But for most of us, that's not going to happen. I think for those of us who create, we just need to create. And it's like, it's great if it's popular. It's great if people love it. But I think we would be worse off if we weren't doing it and doing something else. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'm not a fantastically super celebrity, but I think I'd be worse off if I wasn't doing this at all. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Does that make sense? So, yeah, there is a sense of ego going in with some people. But I think the majority of us are just going in to create because that's what we need to do. So.
And that's the same way, I mean, you know, I've asked on YouTube channel, people are like, oh, you got 1,000 subscribers in your first year or whatever. I'm like, but that's not normal. Most people don't.
Right. It's a lot slower than that.
Yeah, it's a lot slower. But at the same time, you know, I'm not Mr. Beast who did 1 million subscribers in the first year. Like, so like that's something that's, to me, I didn't even think about doing. I mean, I was okay with, you know, 50 subscribers as long as those 50 subscribers were watching the show.
Exactly.
I was okay with that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's a long game. You know what I mean? You got to be in it for the long game. And hopefully that one book, you know what I mean? One person might see that one book, or one person might see that one episode, and boom,
like bam, there it is. Yeah,
level.
My artist buddy, the guy who did the art on my the Plague of Man story, he's in Philadelphia right now for Oddities and Curiosities, and he's like, oh yeah, I sold like some Plague of Man. He did the cover for one of my other books and one of these other ones. And he's like, so your work is now floating around Philadelphia. I'm like, holy crap. Like nice. I probably wouldn't drive to Philadelphia for a show, 'cause that's like a 9-hour drive. But, I think that's what's another part of that, like that circle of people who are all into horror, and creatives and all that. It's like, oh my gosh, vicariously. It's like through this other person, my stuff ended up in a completely new city. So that's super exciting. And that'd be like, hey, that's one more section of the country that probably wouldn't have seen my work if you know I wasn't friends with this guy. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
So by the way, let's talk about your collection of short story book that you posted.
Yeah, I actually have this. This is my latest one. It's called Forever Trapped. It's actually inspired by, do you know the Genesis song Home by the Sea? I want to say it's from the late 70s or early 80s. My husband it's like Genesis is like one of his favorite bands, and he's a drummer, so Phil Collins is like, you know, an idol for him, and he got to play with him and everything. But he knew when we were dating, he's like, how can I get her to listen to Genesis? So he played this song. And it's basically about a house that anyone who enters it becomes trapped. So this guy burgles it, with the intention of stealing a bunch of crap. But once he's inside, he's stuck. So all the souls of all the other people that have become trapped in the house approach him. And they're like, well, now you're with us forever. And it's like, let us share our life stories with you so that we can feel alive again. And I thought, oh my God, that would make a great anthology. So I had written to whoever Genesis, whoever the music company was at the time. It was either EMI or I don't think they even exist anymore, but they may have merged into something else. And I reached out to them. I was like, I wanted to do this. Is this okay? And they asked the guys in the band, and they're like, hell yeah, go ahead, do it. I'm like, all right. So I just wrote a handful of stories. So they take place like from as early as the 1700s to modern day. And it's just a bunch of these random people across the country that end up in this house. And it was so much fun to write. And it took me a while to get through it, but I always told my husband, I'm like, thank you so much for playing that song for me. Because that's how he knew to get to me. He's like, well, she likes horror. How can I get her to listen to my favorite band? So yeah, that was just so much fun. And there's a couple stories in there that I think I pushed my own envelope a little bit. At least it was one of the first times I think that did that, because I was approaching certain subjects in there that I'm not overt with. I'm not grotesque with it, but it's unsettling. So that was actually a good exercise for me to be able to see if I could write something like that. So, and then trying to make them all connect without it sounding repetitive, So, gosh, that was so much fun.
Now, do you prefer writing short stories over full length?
I think it's easier sometimes to do shorter stories. Not that short stories are easy, but I think it usually doesn't take me as long to get through them. Sometimes I can knock those out in a couple days. Sometimes it takes me a few weeks. Novels, I only have 2 under my belt, and those each took me like 2 to 3 years. So I think while I'm working on those, I'll work on these shorter ones that help keep the creativity kind of and my brain moving and not getting stuck on the longer work. So I think they're fun because they're challenging in a way where you have to condense a story into 1,200 words to 5,000 words, somewhere in there, or even like a drabble, which is 100-word story.
Yeah,
exactly. And it's like, and that's like, economy of words, but you have to get your beginning, middle, and end. You still have to figure out how to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. So that I like those kind of challenges. Those are very fun.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Peggy, as you know, this is a horror channel, and every once in a while I like doing this. I'm going to ask you 3 random horror questions.
Oh.
Personal opinion.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
No wrong answers.
Yes. So the first one is, you love vampires. You love vampire movies. Who is besides Jerry Daniels from Fright Night?
Okay.
Who is one vampire that you're like, boy, I would love to be that individual?
Probably, and this is kind of a divisive film for a lot of people, but Gary Oldman's Dracula.
Oh.
He is so suave.
Mm-hmm.
And he's terrifying in the sense of like the power that he has, but it's like he's also like so driven by his love for Mina and Elisabetta. And it's like to have something that strong that you feel about that strongly last for centuries, that even when you're on, like your 1,000th year or whatever, and you're like, oh, that looks just like my ex-wife and I love her so much. And oh my God, I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to get rid of her current guy. I'm going to screw up all these other people's lives. I'm going to do whatever I have to do. Travel across the world. I'm going to find her. And I just love the passion in that particular character, that rendition of Dracula. Yes, the absolute
true love.
I mean, when he almost doesn't turn her because he's like, I love you too much to condemn you. It's like he wants her to be with him forever, but then he realizes he's like, my existence really kind of sucks. It's painful, but I love this woman so much. And I mean, to be able to feel something like that for centuries, are you kidding? I think that character is so awesome. So awesome.
And that movie doesn't get as much praise
I don't,
as it should.
and I understand why, because pretty much except for Gary Oldman, everyone sucks. No pun intended, but the accents are terrible. The acting is terrible, and these are from powerhouse people.
Yes, and this is a big budget movie too.
It was beautiful.
Budget.
Such a stunning
Huge
film.
budget.
But I mean, even Anthony Hopkins, I thought was terrible. I could not stand it.
Keanu Reeves, all of them. Yeah.
And I love everyone who was in that film. I loved all the other things
too.
they've done, but not. I don't know if it was Coppola or like the directing just couldn't get what he needed, or maybe they had to. I don't know what they did over there, but they wasted a lot of potential. But I still love the film. I'll watch it every time it comes on. I'm sure I own it. I'm sure it's up there. It's such a beautiful film, and it's a very emotional film, which for me, if you can pluck my heartstrings, I don't care. You can do whatever the hell you want. I'm like, I will praise you to the heavens for that. So yeah.
All right. The second question: what is a vampire movie that you love that you feel is underrated?
Blood and Donuts. It's a 90s,
I've never seen that one.
It's a Canadian film. It's either 94 or 96, somewhere in there. It's in the 90s. It's very 90s. If you watch it, you're like, oh yeah, this was the mid 90s. Billy Curry plays, oh God, what the heck is his name? I can't remember his character name right at this moment, but he was a vampire for centuries, and he went to sleep like in the 60s, and then he wakes up in the 90s, and he like falls in love with this girl who's like a waitress at a donut shop. But I think David Cronenberg is like the big mafia boss guy, and he's trying to get his little minion guys to get money from someone who owes him, and the guy who's in debt befriends the vampire, and it's very 90s. It's kind of silly. It doesn't take itself very seriously. It's a little lighthearted, but you can totally see how tormented. This is going to bother me now until I can figure out what his freaking name is. But you can tell that. So I'm like, okay, I got to consult the.
I would say what.
And it's okay. I'm sorry, not Billy Curry. Gordon Curry. I always get his name wrong. Boya is the name of the vampire character. So Gordon Curry plays Boya, and Boya is very tormented about his existence because he's like, I don't want to hurt anyone, and he tries not to eat people, and he hooks up with this weird guy who's in debt with the mafia, and it's just everybody, like the relationships and the interactions and just the way the characters are developed and how they all work together are so much fun, and it's very Canadians 90s horror. So if no one has seen that film, they need to see that.
Blood and Donut.
It's so fun. It's so fun.
I just wrote that down. Blood and
Donuts.
And the final question: how did you feel about True Blood?
I never read the books, so I couldn't compare them, but I loved probably the majority of the seasons. I think, what were there, 6 or 7?
Like 6 or 7. Yeah.
Something like that. So I'm like, I didn't have the original books to compare it to, because I think they were more geared more towards young adults, and they made it more adult for HBO. Personally, I enjoyed it immensely until maybe season 4 or 5, things kind of started going off the rails and got really stupid, which is what happens when shows go longer than 4 or 5 years. But even Anna Paquin, Sookie was a little annoying.
100%.
I loved how she I don't know how she's smart mouth with Bill. He's trying to be all I'm a vampire, I'm so tough. She's like, dude, mind your manners. I just thought that was so funny. And I did like how they had a bunch of different creatures. Sam was a shapeshifter, and then you have the fairy queen. I don't know what the hell was going on with that stuff, but
it was weird.
Yeah, and what was his character? It was Tara's cousin. He was the cook at the restaurant.
Oh, Lafayette.
He was my absolute favorite.
Lafayette was
for
fun.
The humans, he was my absolute favorite character because he just did not give a fuck. And he's like, this is what I think, and you're going to hear what I have to say. And I love that because I'm not like that. I'm very much no, don't cause conflict. So I love characters like that. And when they're actually quite caring about their friends and family, and it's like, and they're very loyal and very protective. And then as far as the vampires, obviously Eric Northman has to be the best because he's so bad. Mm-hmm. And then he gets a slight taste of like to be empathetic or to have more of that soul, quote unquote, as opposed to just being completely cold-blooded all the time. But yeah, and his sarcasm, I think his level of snark, chef's kiss. So
I didn't watch that show when it was like, I think it was like in the 4th season by the time I caught on to it. And and I didn't have cable at the time. I didn't have HBO at the time. So this is, I'm dating my age, but I would go to Blockbuster and rent the seasons to catch up.
Oh, okay, sure.
And then because at the time I worked in an office. This is probably the 3rd time in my life I worked in an office where I was the only man. Oh. And all the women in the office were kept talking about True Blood, True Blood, True Blood. Travis, you will love True Blood. And I was like, ugh, Twilight. That's the first thing that popped in my mind. and then I rented a season of it out, and I felt, listen, I was addicted to True Blood up until the season before the last. Okay. I struggled to finish that season.
Yeah.
And then that last season, I think after the 2nd episode, I checked out, and I never finished the series.
Yeah.
I don't know how it ends or anything. And I was so invested in that show, and that's one of those shows that The Walking Dead is another one I throw up there. But I was so invested in it in the beginning, and I completely checked out at the end.
Yeah. I don't know if they just got overcomplicated or they just didn't know which direction they were going, and so they were just throwing everything out there. It's just like throwing spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. I'm not really sure. But extra credit here. If you want a really, I think, very entertaining vampire show that nobody ever freaking talks about, it's also Canadian, also from the 90s, Forever Night. Have you heard of it?
No, I have not.
It's, I believe, maybe seasons 1 and 2 or seasons 2 and 3 are on Prime, I think, right now. But there were only 3 seasons. And I think people had a hard time figuring out, like, even it existed because it came out in, like, 92, and then they had, like, a year off. And then 94, and they had a year off. So I don't know if it was money struggles or because they changed casting, like the captain of the police station changed every season. And by the 3rd season, like one of the main characters was just gone. But it's such a great, I really enjoyed it because it's like the main character is a guy who's been a vampire for 800 years. And now he's kind of wants to be a better person, so he becomes a homicide detective in Toronto.
Oh, wow.
So he has to work with humans but hide his vampire self, and then the medical examiner knows about him, so they're trying to find a way to, like, take out, like, to have him stop being a vampire, like a cure. So, like, his partner doesn't know, nobody in the precincts know, but his sire is in town, his ex-lover's in town, so there's all this cool interaction. And Nick is a really good, like, he's trying to be a hero, he's trying to make up, he's trying to reform. Whereas his maker, his sire, is so evil. And he's so much fun. Nigel Bennett plays Lacroix, and he is my absolute favorite. Probably one of my favorite vampires of any TV and movies that I've watched. So he'd definitely be, I think, in the top 3. So if you can find it, but it's Forever Night, KNIGHT.
So now I've got some new vampire content to watch.
Yes, you do. Yes, that's your homework.
Peggy, where can everyone find you and your work?
I have a website, so I have links to everything that I have published or all of my public appearances, that kind of stuff. It's just themonkeyisin.com. It looks like The Monkey I Sin, which some people interpret it that way, which is weird. But it's themonkeyisin.com, and I have links and information to my writers group, to my appearances, to my books, to everything.
Love it. Listen, everyone, please follow Peggy and grab the vessel and all of her work. And Peggy, listen, this was fun.
Same here. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, you're more than welcome to come back anytime. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for coming to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and that's Peggy Christie.
Bye.
We'll see you next time. Take care.